where I'm the Marketing Communications Manager with Kepware. I'll be moderating today's webinar. Joanne Okvath and Sam Elsner, both Kepware Applications Engineers, will host today's presentation. So our half-hour webinar will provide a technical overview of ClientAce's features and functionalities in addition to a live product demonstration. With the version 4 release of ClientAce, users can easily build and manage connections to OPC UA, OPC DA, and OPC XML-DA servers from .NET applications. If at any time during the presentation you have a question, please raise your hand or type directly into the questions pane using your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll respond to you as quickly as possible. I'll now turn the presentation over to Joanne and Sam. Thank you.
Thanks for joining today. You should see a poll in your window. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. That's why. You can start. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you are from North America, which is what we were expecting, but we do have some from Asia Pacific, Europe, and South America. So thank you, especially those that are joining us from time zones that are very far off ours. I know it's a strange time of the day for you, so thank you for taking the time to join us. We appreciate that you think this is important enough to sign on. So today, as Tori said, is about ClientAce 4.0. Like I said, there was a poll at the beginning. There'll be a couple more polls when we get started here, and then Sam will go into some of the technical content. He'll get into the nitty-gritty details. So what we are covering today, intro to ClientAce, for those of you who may not be familiar with it. What's new in ClientAce 4.0? That's our newest release. It just came out in July. And then, like I said, Sam will get into a demo and talking about some details for developing and deploying, and then we'll wrap it up. So first thing we want to ask is, what is your familiarity with ClientAce? Have you never heard of it? Are you just aware of it? Or have you actually used it? And to what level, beginner, intermediate, or expert? So I'm going to go ahead and launch another poll here to get your feedback there. And this is just so we can tailor the presentation to the attendees' level of knowledge of ClientAce, and we know what to do. Okay, great. I'm seeing some responses come through. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to wait a moment more to make sure everybody can respond. Wonderful. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you, and pretty much what I expected, kind of a Gaussian curve around aware of ClientAce, but it does look like we have some intermediate and maybe even some expert and power users in the group, so that's great. We'll have content for everybody for sure in order for you to get the most out of this webinar. Also, I just want to say you can type any comment or question into the question pane when we're going through here. So if you have any questions, feel free to type it in and we'll answer it on the fly, or maybe hold it off till later to answer that. Okay. So what is ClientAce for those of you who are never heard of it or just aware of it? It's an OPC client development toolkit for Visual Studio, and you can program C# VB.NET to do this development and very quickly and easily do OPC DA client, UA client, and XML-DA client work. Now here's the big question. We know what ClientAce is, right? It integrates with Visual Studio to allow you to do that client programming. But why do you use it, and for what problems could you use it? For what scenarios? So the first one is pretty straightforward, right? You just need to develop a new OPC client, and it needs to have DA or UA or XML-DA connectivity to those servers. You need to add existing connectivity to a .NET application. Maybe you already have something developed and you want to add quick connectivity for those type of servers. Totally pretty standard scenarios there and totally possible with ClientAce. This is where it gets cool. You're brand new to OPC. You don't know the spec. You're not familiar with programming clients to do OPC communication and you're not really sure how the OPC client server architecture works, well, you know what, with ClientAce, drag and drop, super easy to use, and you can quickly develop those OPC client applications without having to learn new code. Maybe you have a previous ClientAce application. Previous to 4.0, we only supported DA, and you want to add UA or XML-DA to that. And then the last two, you need an inexpensive alternative to commercial client applications, or you want more control than those applications allow you. You have a light situation, maybe a light panel, or a simple kind of client situation where you don't want to spend a lot of money on these huge commercial packages, and they don't give you the control you want. They don't give you the functionality you want, right? So those are all reasons why you would use it. So last poll question, I promise, is we want to know what problems are you trying to solve with ClientAce? Why are you using it if you are, or what could you see yourself using it? So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. So new OPC client, integrate with an existing client, add UA or XML-DA connectivity. You want an inexpensive alternative. This is multiple choice, so you can answer multiple of them if multiple apply, or other. And if it's other, I would ask that you type your answer to other in the question pane so we can see what your application is. Okay, I'm getting some great feedback here. Really interesting. This is great because this type of stuff helps us target the software to your needs as well. So anything you answer here could help drive future product development. Okay, great. Almost everybody's voted, so that's wonderful. Oh, and I'm getting some comments through. So some of the other answers are, we have a service-based application that connects OPC to ERP software. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Alternatives, LabVIEW, Citadel, DSC, or maybe that's DCS. And some people just learning. Oh, some want Linux support. That's interesting. And then I'm getting it's pretty really cool from Trevor. Thanks, Trevor. Tie in SCADA information to overlay on a GIS application. Really neat. Okay, cool. So I'm going to share this poll with you, so show what everybody answered. Looks like a lot of you are doing what we would consider, kind of standard scenarios. You're developing a new client, adding connectivity to an existing client. And some of you are adding UA or XML-DA client connectivity, so that's great to see because we're definitely moving towards more UA type of connectivity, so that's pretty neat. One more comment. In an existing application, have an OPC client other than Kepware. Concern that it might be affecting Kep server stability. I think Kepware server client is better. All right. Makes sense. Use the same software for connection, right? We do sometimes see that even though someone says they're following the OPC spec, they may not be following that to the fullest extent, and that oftentimes does cause communication issues. So just use software that you know is reliable, that does the work well, and it gets connected well. Thanks, Mike. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll out. So thank you for your feedback there. And just to let you know, that feedback, those polls and everything will be posted in our blog. Candace, our social media expert, will be posting that and putting up some infographics so you can see what everybody's response to that was. So what is new in 4.0? And I already touched upon this a little bit in the presentation. UA and XML-DA, huge addition to 4.0, especially with UA becoming more popular and bypassing DCOM and all that great functionality that comes with UA. Support for .NET 4.0, and then the latest Visual Studio, 2010 and 2012, which is nice for all the programmers in the bunch. And then as well, we just did some nice DA maintenance, some housekeeping in order to make those DA connections smoother for you, especially with third-party type servers, right? Okay, so there is a question for Visual Studio 2013. Is that planned? It's not on the, well, it's on the roadmap, but it's not in the schedule yet, Paul. So we will let you know via email and updates when that is going to be released. All right. Good. Any other questions on that? Okay. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Sam. He's going to walk you through the demo and show you some really great functionality for ClientAce. So without further ado.
Great. Thanks, Joanne. Hey, everybody. I'm Sam Elsner. I'm an applications engineer with Joanne at Kepware. I'm going to show you what development with ClientAce is like, and then I'm going to go over some details regarding deployment. So first off, developing with ClientAce can be really, really easy. You can actually do it in 3 simple steps. So what I'm going to show you here is we're going to build a Windows Form application to display some OPC items. I'm going to drag and drop the DA junction, which is one way to develop with ClientAce, onto my form. And then I'm going to use the DA junction's graphical user interface to add OPC servers and then also item references. I'm not going to do any code. That's one of the really nice things about ClientAce is that you can only get into the code if you want to. And when you don't, you can use the DA junction to handle your connections to OPC DA UA servers. XML-DA you'll need to do through the .NET API that we expose, but I'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do is switch over to a virtual machine that I have running on my PC. So I'm going to exit the presentation, and then I'm going to move over to my other desktop. All right, so here I've got a nice Windows 7 machine. What I'm going to do first is show you the OPC server that I'm going to connect to. Right, I'm not going to bring up Visual Studio yet. I'm just going to show you the server I'm going to connect to, and then show you the items that I've created to demonstrate ClientAce's functionality. So being Kepware, I'm going to use Server EX version 5, the latest version. It's 5.12. So I'm going to bring up the Server Configuration window here. I already have a channel and device created. So this channel is a simulator channel, and the device has a couple of tags. A tag that's ramping, meaning it's going to scroll through values from 1 to whatever the data type can hold. And the rate that we scroll through those values is the rate that the client requests. So within ClientAce, in a little bit, you're going to see me request an update rate of Cap Server of 1 second. So that means that these values from this ramping tag are going to change once a second. I've also got a random tag displayed here. And this random tag is going to change in value every 500 milliseconds, so every half second. And the values that it scrolls through are going to be from, or the values that it posts are going to be from 10,000 to 20,000. So what I'm going to do now is, also I wanted to mention that Kepserver supports both DA and UA connections simultaneously. So I've gone ahead and configured both. I'm not going to show you that configuration. We can cover that topic in a later webinar. But just know that with Kepserver we can do DA and UAs, and that's what I'm going to leverage within my ClientAce application. All right. So I am going to jump into Visual Studio now. And I've got Visual Studio 2012 on the PC here. The first step, I'm going to start from scratch. So I'm going to make a brand new project. And the project that I'm going to make is going to target the .NET 4 framework. And then the project type is going to be a Visual C# Windows Form application. You can create other types of applications too, but this one I'm going to use a Windows Form app. I'm going to click OK, and this is going to build my IDE for me. Well, great. When you first open Visual Studio, a lot of you are developers, and you already know this, but when you first open Visual Studio, your toolbox is going to be hidden on the left-hand side here. What I like to do is expand the toolbox and then pin it so that I can easily drag and drop control objects onto my form. So the first thing, just before I start getting into developing this app, I need to target 32-bit processors with the ClientAce toolkit. It means x86 systems. And there shouldn't really be any worry about running on 64-bit, because what happens when a 32-bit app runs on a 64-bit system is Windows handles that with the Windows on Windows compatibility layer. Its shorthand name is WOW64. So I'm going to develop a 32-bit app with ClientAce, because that's what we can do. So to build, in order to target 32-bit apps, I need to create a new build setting here. So I'm going to go into my configuration manager. I'm going to change my active solution config to a new config, and I'm going to title this config ClientAce. You can do this any way you want, but this is just for demonstration purposes. This is the way I'm going to do it. Under Active Solution Platform, I don't want to target any CPU. I need to specifically target x86 CPUs. So I'm going to choose x86 from my new platform drop-down here. Click OK. And then I'm going to close the Configuration Manager interface. And now you can see I have three build settings available. I've got ClientAce that I just created. I've also got debug and release. So I'm going to choose ClientAce for this demonstration. All right, so again, I haven't touched any code yet, and I'm not going to for this presentation because the DA junction makes just everything so easy. So what I'm going to do is drag a couple of text boxes onto my Windows form so that I can show you data that's being made available by the Kepware server, OPC DA and UA server. So I'm going to drag first text box on here. You can see it populate the form. And then I'm going to grab another text box because what I'm going to show you guys is that we can make simultaneously with the DA junction, we can make an item reference over an OPC DA connection and an item reference over an OPC UA connection. And we can bring both of those into a single application simultaneously. So the next thing I'm going to do, just for detailedness, I guess, is to add some labels to my Windows form app. These labels are going to tell you where the data is coming from and what type of data you're getting. So I'm just going to select the label, and I'm going to call this one OPC DA, and this will be my ramping value. And this label is going to be called...
Okay, we got a question. I missed it. Does it mean that we cannot generate pure 64-bit code with ClientAce?
That's correct. You cannot generate pure 64-bit code with ClientAce. You need to target x86 or 32-bit processors only.
Good question.
Okay, so now I'm going to entitle the second label OPC UA random value. Great. So now I've got a couple of control objects. I've got two text boxes, and I've got other couple of controls that are just going to present you those labels, OPC DA and OPC UA. So now, here's where the rubber hits the road, as some of my colleagues like to say. What I'm going to do is build the ClientAce DA junction. So I'm going to minimize my common controls here. And since I've got ClientAce installed, you can see that in my toolbox, in my toolkit here, I've got the ClientAce control objects that I can grab and drop onto my form. So for this demonstration, I'm going to demo the DA junction. So I'm going to take the DA junction control object and just drag it and drop it right onto my Windows form. And you can see it doesn't present any information right on the form itself. It's a background control object. So you can see it's selectable here at the bottom of the screen. So what I'm going to do now is, now that I've added the DA junction on my form, I'm going to launch its configuration interface. It's totally GUI driven. So over here, I'm going to click to open the configuration. I can click it, and then there's an ellipsis that'll open here. And here's the DA junction graphical user interface. So what I'm going to do first, you'll notice that the DA junction is organized servers in the upper left, form control objects on the right, and then down below we have our individual item connections. So I'm going to add a new server connection for my DA connectivity first. So to do that, really simple, I just double click to change server. And here's a view of all of the OPC DA servers on my machine. The server browser tab is just going to show you DA servers. There's also a tab specifically for DA that you'll notice, and that's if you wanted to add manually the prog ID and host name of the DA server you want to connect to. So for this, because it's all local and because I've got everything set up, I'm going to use the server browser. I'm going to choose to connect to Kepware server EX5. So I'm going to double click the prog ID here. And you can see that it puts the prog ID and the host name right in nicely in order right in my server item list. So now what I'm going to do is browse the DA server's address space, and the tag that I want to grab from the DA server is going to be the ramping tag. So here I just click the plus button, I browse the address space. Here's the name of the channel that you saw. Let me show you in the view of the Kepware server configuration window. So I'm going to expand that channel, expand the device, and there are my two tags. So like I said, I want a DA connection to send me this ramping tag. So I'm going to drag the ramping tag right onto my first item connection row. And here you are. You can see that the server name or server address is automatically listed. The item address is automatically listed. And then we have fields for setting the direction, which is essentially read-write behavior of the item. setting the control name that the item is going to be published to, and then we can set the property of the control object that we're going to use to display these values. There's also a settings tab, and this will allow me to control granularly at an item level how fast that tag is scanned. So first I'm going to set the direction. Now, the way that the DA junction demonstrates read-write is whether or not the item can update the control, be updated by the control, or if the control and the item can update each other. So item update control, you probably guessed it, it's read-only. Item is updated by control, you've guessed that too, it's write-only. And then the last, of course, is read-write. So for this example, I'm going to choose read-only, or the item can only update the control. Now I simply add I choose to update my text box. It's worth noting that I could also drag and drop the text box here. And then I can choose the property of that control object to update. And obviously I want to leave this as text. So here, I'm going to show you the settings interface where we can determine how quickly the tag is updated. So like I said, the ramping tag simply scrolls through values at the rate that the client requests. So I'm going to leave this at 1 second. That means we're going to scroll through values from 0 through 35565 every 1 second. So one value a second, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay, so there I've got a DA connection already. Very easy. I didn't touch code. Maybe took 30 seconds. It would take less if I wasn't explaining it, so you can imagine how quickly this is. Okay, so now I've got a connection to a DA object. Now I want to create a connection to a UA object. So what I'm going to do first is just minimize the address space of this DA server so I can manage the DA junction a little more easily. Then I'm going to double click to change the server, or in this case, it's going to add a new server. And then I'm going to come over here and click the OPC UA tab. So here I'm going to need to specify manually the endpoint URL, or the endpoint address of the UA server that I want to connect to. But before I do that, I'm just going to give this application object a name. So I'm going to name it KepServerEX. And now for those of you using KepServer, I'm going to show you where in our server you are able to expose the endpoint URL. So that's in the administration tools OPC UA configuration dialog box. So I'm going to right click on the KepServerEX administration tool. And then I'm going to launch the OPC UA configuration pane. And you can see here that I've already set up an OPC endpoint, an OPC UA endpoint for only local connections here on port 49320. For simplicity, I'm not using any security. So again, to access this pane with KepServer, it would just be right click on the admin tool, bring up OPC UA configuration, click the server endpoints tab, and then there you go. There are all your server endpoints. Okay, so now I'm going to manually type in the address of that endpoint. And then again, I'm not going to specify any security because my endpoint doesn't require it, and I'm going to log in anonymously. So there we go. Now you see just below the DA server connection, I've got now a UA server connection within the same field. So very simple. I'm going to expand to view the UA server's address space, just like I did for the DA server connection. And here you go. It's the same simulator channel that you saw before, the same device below the simulator channel that you saw before, and then the same tags that you saw before. But this data is coming over an OPC UA connection instead of a DA connection. So now I'm going to drag and drop the random tag onto the second connection row. And again, the address of the server and the address of the item is automatically populated. And I'm going to choose the item can update the control so that the behavior is read-only. This time for a text box, I'm going to drag and drop text box number 2 instead of text box number 1. And the property defaults to text. So here is where something interesting I want to show you. The random values are going to be posted every 500 milliseconds, which means I need to read those values every 250 milliseconds to make sure that I don't miss any updates. It's just simple sampling. Always you want to read twice as fast as the data is actually changing. So I'm going to change the update rate to 250 milliseconds for the UA connection object only. And that I can do, again, on an individual tag basis, so very granular control. So here we are. I've got one connection to DA, one connection to UA, 2 tags mapped, updating my form to the 2 text boxes, and I'm ready to close the DA junction and move on. Okay, so What I'm going to do now, just before I launch my application, I want you to notice that with the ClientAce control object selected, you have a set of properties here on the right-hand side. One of the benefits of ClientAce is that ClientAce can automatically set a background color if ClientAce loses connection to the DA server or UA server, or the item's quality is set to bad by the UA or DA server. So automatically, very easily, you know if you have a problem with your connection either down to the device or down to the server itself. And you can choose different colors for each of these conditions. Again, a lack of connectivity to the server itself, or if the server has lost connection to the device. Bad color error would be a connection error, and bad color quality or bad color quality would be the server's lost connection to the device. So with that, you can also notice here that you have a default update rate that you can specify, and you can show a tooltip hovering over the value, and that'll give you the timestamp in that. For that moment in time when you place your mouse over the value, it'll give you also the timestamp automatically, which might be nice for visualizing some data that doesn't change too quickly. Okay, so now I'm ready to launch. I've targeted 32-bit processors. I've built a simple form. I've configured the DA junction. Now I'm ready to go. So
just 1 minute, Sam. We have a question from Paul. This may not be the appropriate time, but ClientAce looks like it wouldn't be the right solution if I want my OPC tags to be logged into a SQL server, correct?
Actually, Paul, that's a really interesting question. There are a couple ways that you can do this. One of those ways is with ClientAce. It's helped by ClientAce, rather. So what ClientAce can do is bring data into your application, and then you can do whatever you want with that data. You wouldn't necessarily use the DA. Well, you could use the DA junction to do that. You might have a more complete and better picture of all of that doing it with our .NET API, which is code rather than our DA junction. But my demonstration is just visualizing this data. You could really simply add a control object for connections to SQL. And instead of updating a text-based control object, you can update that SQL control object. And so the DA junction could just push data into a SQL server for you. So that's way number one that you can do that, and that's using ClientAce. Again, ClientAce is just a facilitator of getting data from OPC servers into your application. And then what you do with the data once it's in the application is entirely up to you. You can certainly push that into SQL. We wouldn't be responsible, as in ClientAce wouldn't push it into SQL, but you could certainly do that with other code. Now, just as an aside, the other way to do that is with Kepserver alone. So Kepserver has a data logger plugin that can push data automatically under triggered conditions to any kind of ODBC compatible database, and SQL is ODBC compatible. So Kepserver could do that automatically for you without you having to work it up in a client. So you got a couple options with their products there.
Does that answer your question, Paul? Okay, great.
Excellent. Okay, so now I'm ready to start the application. So I'm going to click the Start button. Okay, this error just means I didn't debug it. And in this case, I'm going to ignore it and click OK. So here you go. This is my application. I developed it in less than 5 minutes, and I'm visualizing data from two types of servers, DA and UA. You can see that I've just got a ClientAce pop-up here. This ClientAce pop-up tells me that my application that I've developed is not signed. And I'm going to cover what signing is later on in the presentation. But for now, I'm going to click Continue. You can see that the top DA connection is ramping through values once per second. And you can see the bottom UA connection is randomly changing in value from 10,000 to 20,000 every half second. So I've got two different update rates from two different kinds of server interfaces here. And it took me less than 5 minutes to put this together. You guys have any other questions before I move on? All right, great. One last thing I'm going to demonstrate for you before I complete the development portion of the presentation is the automatic background color changing. So in order to force bad quality with Kepserver, it's pretty easy. I can disable data collection on the device. So I'm going to come into Kepserver's interface. I'm going to open the Properties menu, and then I'm just going to disable data collection and hit Apply. And you'll see those two objects that I've created, those control objects, post with a red background right away. Now, the important thing to know here is that that happened automatically. And when I enable data collection or when I get connectivity to my device again, ClientAce handles that totally. it reconnects, it re-references, and it'll handle everything behind the scenes for you. So there's very little that you need to do in terms of connection handling. And great. So there, I have an application. Excellent. All right. So now I'm going to flip back to my normal Mac OS desktop, and I'm going to start my presentation again. So I wanted to cover some primary technical requirements just to make sure that there's no confusion about when and where ClientAce can be used. And I think we actually have a question before that, Paul. So Paul's question is, how does this scale with increasing amounts of tags, and where is the overhead? So ClientAce can handle, there's really no hard-coded limit to the number of item references ClientAce can handle. We've got customers using, Joanne will talk later in the presentation, but we've got customers who've written an entire management execution system, an MES system with ClientAce as the back end. They've got thousands and thousands of data points. In terms of where the overhead is, the overhead, it's really, I wouldn't say that there is overhead necessarily with increasing tags. Now, certainly there's more connections made, but ClientAce can handle those connections just fine. And really your first bottleneck is going to be how quickly you can get data back from devices. The next bottleneck is going to be how quickly you can get data back from servers. And those you would hit well before you hit any kind of scaling problem within the .NET app that's using ClientAce. And then where can you get Kepware for Mac? I would love to know too. That I'm actually running a virtual machine on my Mac. So I'm running Windows 7. And we don't have a Mac OS version of Kep Server EX available. The next question is, I know, I don't like it either. Maybe someday. Just keep asking us for it and maybe we'll develop it. So how would you implement multiple forms and a single OPC UA connection? That's a great question. I'm gonna table that one for now and get back to that one later. Then we're creating DLLs that use ClientAce 3.5. Is that going to be an issue in 4.0? Well, ClientAce can't sign DLLs, right? So we need to target an executable rather than a DLL. So it's interesting that you're doing that with 3.5. The behavior, I would say that whatever you're doing in 3.5 is going to, you're going to continue to be able to do in 4.0. But if you're running up against any problems with that, maybe we can talk about that offline, because the way that ClientAce works, when we sign an application, we've got to have an exactly. There is a follow-up post there. If he doesn't sign the DLL as well as the EXE, you got to sign the EXE at the end of the day for the product to be licensed, for your product that you're developing to be licensed. Okay, so the primary technical details, you've all had time to read these by now, but you have to be developing in C# or VB.NET. You got to be in a .NET 4.0 environment or below. It's got to be an executable that the ultimate application that you're developing has got to be inside of an EXE. And we have to target 32-bit CPUs. Okay, so here's some more technical details. It's just overall support. We've got support for .NET 4.0 and VS 2010 or 2012. We also support 3.5 and below with version VS 2008. The only thing there is that we can only do DA client connectivity with .NET 3.5. We use the .NET 4.0 framework to build UA and XML-DA. You got to have at least a minimum of C# language pack installed. That's because the backend libraries of ClientAce are written in C#. So you got to have that C#. You can develop in VB.NET, but you also have to have C# installed. In terms of operating system requirements, really simple. You just need to have ClientAce apps run on this. They share the same requirements as the Visual Studio version that you're using to develop with ClientAce. So ClientAce can be installed as long as Visual Studio can be installed. The OPC specs that we support within ClientAce are OPC DA 2.0, 2.05a, and 3.0, UA, XML-DA. And with UA, we only support right now the data access information model. In XML-DA, there hasn't been another version released. That's why you don't see any version information there. And now I kind of debated whether or not this should be a separate slide, but there's actually a couple ways to develop. I've shown you the DA junction, right? Here's the DA junction. You saw that during my demonstration. It's a GUI. We can only do XML-DA through the API. You can really simply build and manage multiple connections to OPC DA and UA servers, automatic server reconnection, tag subscription management. One thing I didn't show you is the ability to assign what we call triggers, which are automatic write behavior. So you could key in automatic write behavior for keystrokes on a keyboard, or certain conditions happening within the application, or mouse clicks, mouse scrolls, mouse position. And then we also, like I showed you, have automatic color representations of tag quality and server connection problems. No, you wouldn't be able to develop class libraries with the ClientAce API. We have to target an executable. So you could develop. Well, let me actually table that one. We can ask some of our ClientAce product managers downstairs. But for now, the end application would need to be an executable, and you'd actually have to sign that executable with ClientAce's licensing tools. You could create a Windows service. Yep. There's a question about whether or not you could create Windows services, and the answer is yes. So here's the second way you can develop. This is through what we call the .NET API. The ClientAce.NET API, here's an example of an OPC DA connection object. With the .NET API, you have a single optimized class library for building all of the specs of OPC that we support, meaning all of the code that you're going to be writing will be exactly the same across these different specifications. So you don't have to have detailed knowledge of every OPC interface that you're going to work with. Once you learn the .NET API, you can do UA, DA, or XML-DA. The only difference between UA, DA, and XML-DA within the .NET API is literally only the connection object. That's all that's going to change from these different OPC specs. So you can have all of your code written out for a DA connection, and you're making a DA connection object on the top. Wipe that out, put in a UA connection object, and suddenly your application's an OPC UA client. Again, within the .NET API as well, we have automated connection sharing, or connection handling, and connection establishment, and monitoring, and then reconnection too. So now we're on to deployment. So here's where ClientAce's licensing model comes into play. ClientAce is a development license, and that means that the ClientAce toolkit itself is licensed. You're buying that license to use the toolkit from us. So you'll install ClientAce, and then you'll license the toolkit. And what this allows you to do is not pay a licensing fee for the applications that you develop with ClientAce. You've already paid us for the ability to use our toolkit, and then you can develop as many apps as you'd like. The actual process of licensing your apps is what we call signing. I don't know if you noticed, but there are sign and unsign buttons in the Visual Studio IDE that I use to develop. There are a few different ways that apps can be signed, and as you can see here, signing is the process of licensing so your applications don't have a runtime limit. So what happens when an app is signed is that during the build process, a license file is outputted into the same directory as the end executable. And then when you're deploying the application, all that you need to do is make sure that the license file lives in the same directory as the executable. And then there are 4 different ways that you can actually license or sign the application. You can do it through the Visual Studio IDE, that we have buttons in there. You can use our standalone sign app just in the normal file system. You can use the command line, or you can manually enter your own post-build event to sign. And then the last thing is just the trial period. Unsigned applications are going to run for 1 hour at a time. And that is true whether ClientAce itself is licensed or not. So you can right now download ClientAce and begin developing. And you'll notice that when you develop apps, they'll run for an hour and you have to shut them down and turn them back on. But other than that, that's the only limit. So you can really get a good look and feel for ClientAce before you decide to buy it. And there we go. So I'm going to hand the presentation back over to Joanne, and she's going to do some wrap up.
Okay, thanks for all your attention. So we just have a few more bullet points here. Sam mentioned this earlier about the MES system that one of our customers developed using ClientAce. They manufacture farm equipment, big manufacturer here. We can't say any names, but you might be able to guess. And they did their entire MES system using ClientAce, like Sam said, tens of thousands of I/O points going through there. So it's very slick, and we work with them all the time. to help get them updated with that, as well as other software that they're using. So another use case is people developing SCADA packages, entire SCADA packages using ClientAce. European car manufacturer, as well as a manufacturer of plastic toy blocks for children. You may also be able to guess who that is. So huge packages, software systems kind of being developed with this functionality. But then on the flip side, we have the kind of opposite side of the spectrum that you can also use ClientAce for, right? Just simple standalone apps for visualizing process data. Again, if you don't want to use those very expensive, large commercial applications, you can license ClientAce and do some kind of light applications like scoreboards, tickers, counters, or maybe you have a light panel you want to develop for. Very easy to do. There we go. All right. Any other questions before the summary here? Okay, so if I have multiple build machines, do I need multiple licenses?
Yep, you do.
Okay. Well, in summary, really, we just want to emphasize that it's really easy to jump in, right? You don't need really specific OPC skills or to even know the OPC spec in order to do this. You can handle those multiple protocols, and through all that single API, easy to convert. DA, through the single API, you can handle those multiple server connections, but you can also convert easily, especially if you're using the .NET. You can just real easy turn that ClientAce OPC DA app into an OPC UA or XML-DA app with only a few lines of code, like Sam was speaking about. And then, like we said, friendly licensing, right? And it's easy to try for free. The only limit is that your apps have a 1-hour runtime. The other really nice thing to have with that is that you're supported. So if you're using ClientAce, and maybe oftentimes developers are just kind of developing in a box and you have to, ask your colleagues or search Google for an answer. Well, if you're using ClientAce, you can call up our technical support. We'll give you example code. We'll give you any support that you need, really, as well as you can get the free, Kepware Server EX with the simulator driver in order to test out your connectivity. So we have a question. How is fault tolerance in ClientAce?
Yeah, so fault tolerance in ClientAce is really limited by the kinds of protocols that ClientAce uses. So OPC DA, there's not really a great fault tolerance solution for that protocol, right? It's up to third-party products to provide that fault tolerance. So we have a third-party product that does it. Other folks have third-party products that does it. Just because Kepware, I have to mention, it's redundancy master from us. That's what you'd use to provide failover between different OPC DA servers. With XML-DA, unfortunately, there's not really. Unfortunately, so just to reiterate what I said before, I'm going to slow down a little bit. Fault tolerance in OPC DA is lacking in that protocol itself. So it's up to third-party products really to provide that kind of failover between target OPC DA servers. So what ClientAce can do is leverage those third-party products. Like our product would be redundancy master, and we would be able to fail between server pairs in order to provide fault tolerance for your OPC DA connectivity. XML-DA and XML-UA, XML-DA and then our UA connectivity don't have, are sort of limited by the implementation of UA. So there's not fault tolerance built into those kind of connections. However, in code, you could easily have, ClientAce's DA junction will handle automatically reconnecting to servers and re-referencing items for you, assuming that server becomes available again, right? But with the .NET API, you could code in your own redundancy where if you lose connectivity to a primary server, either XML-DA or UA, you could automatically connect, again, with the .NET API, you could automatically connect over to a separate server. But that would be something you'd want to do in the .NET API. Next question was features on the roadmap that we should know about. Well, ClientAce 4.0 just released, so we're sort of looking back at our backlog of features, and we don't really have a structured roadmap yet, but definitely stay tuned for additional features. We're thinking a lot about different kinds of information models to use with OPC UA, since it is such a big and powerful, broad protocol. We're thinking about other types of OPC connectivity. We're thinking about other kinds of features like redundancy and sort of different types of connectivity handling, but really nothing solidified on the roadmap just yet. One of the other questions was, can ClientAce be installed with Visual Studio 2010 Express? And thank you, Marilla, for asking this. No, it cannot. And the reason is that ClientAce is meant for the enterprise. And Express is strictly meant, this is what Microsoft says anyway, Express is strictly meant for education and training only. So somebody developing a client application for a company would not be able to technically use a Visual Studio Express. That does limit folks who just want to use it in a university environment, but we can always work on pricing since you got to buy the pro version of ES anyway. So. And then one other question was, is there notification events in API that I can receive on that, and based on that, decide about fault tolerance or sending notification alarms? And yeah, absolutely. All these protocols that we're using, OPC DA, OPC UA XML, and OPC XML-DA, they all have error handling built in, right? So the server will pass back certain error codes that you can consume in your client using the .NET API, and then you can decide what to do after you see those particular events. So really, you can do that through the HR codes that are part of COM-based connections or DA connections, or you can do that with the UA error codes that are part of the OPC UA spec. But once those error codes are in your software, you can use the ClientAce API to determine what to do next, or you could not use the API and instead use whatever other kinds of toolkits you want to decide what to do. So one example would be you could really easily turn your application that uses ClientAce by adding some other code that's not necessarily part of ClientAce. You could build a paging system that when you see an error code that indicates, that an item is not available anymore, you could build in code using a different kind of toolkit that supports a paging system to page out over your plant after receiving that error code from the server. So long and the short of it is that error codes are part of all these protocols that we're doing, and the servers that you're going to be connecting to, if they followed OPC spec like Kep server, you'll be able to see those error codes in ClientAce exposed from the server. So then you can decide within your application what to do when you see those error codes. And some of that you can do within the toolkit, ClientAce toolkit, and some of that you might want to do outside of the toolkit, depending on the kind of functionality you want.
Okay. Great. So that's it. Thank you for attending. You can contact us. There's our contact info. You can contact us directly, training@kepware.com, training@kepware.com, training@kepware.com. Can we get documentation for ClientAce? Certainly, that will be sent out with a follow-up email, links to this recording, helpful documentation, as well as info about our blog, where you can find the webinar stats for this on all those poll questions. And without having license for that, I believe you mean, can you download ClientAce and use it without a license? Certainly.
Also comes with the documentation for ClientAce too. So yep. you can pull down PDF versions of the ClientAce help file in order to just see what some of the .NET API code looks like and some of the other features and functionality. But to actually get access to the example code, you would need to install ClientAce.
Yeah, so I think there's a great question coming up here. So within 24 hours of this webinar, we will send out everyone who registered for this webinar with an email. We will attach a link to this recorded presentation. We'll also provide documentation in that email as well. So if you have absolutely any questions or need further information after that email, just let us know and we'll get you what you need.
And Paul, I see that we missed one of your questions earlier. Any chance that the licensing model will change? We don't have plans to change it. So I would say if you're in a situation where you have a lot of build machines that you would need to license, reach out to one of our sales guys and we can put together a package for you that makes sense. All right.
Okay, thank you for attending. If you want any more info, we do offer on-site training classes. We'll come to you. We have a class that we host here in Portland once monthly, as well as more webinars like this. And if you want to access previous webinars or videos that we've done, we have a YouTube channel on for Kepware. So plenty of information for you to access. And with that, we can sign off. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.